Hola, and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. We talk everything animation here, including StevenUniverse, which we'll be getting into today. I'm Alex Bonilla, your host, and today I'm joined by John McKenna.
Hi, everybody.
And Dylan Hysen.
Hello.
So, first time I get Dylan as a co-host, so this should be fun.
That'll be great.
But usually Dylan will be hosting, and you can find more about his hosting as well as other hosts on this podcast at overlyanimated.com. You can subscribe to our StevenUniverse feed or our general podcast feed on iTunes or on your preferred podcatcher. Wherever you listen to us, we appreciate ratings and reviews if you enjoy our work. StevenUniverse we'll be talking about today. We're in the middle of a very long hiatus that has led to very little content for us to discuss. So today we'll take the opportunity of an episode tournament on StevenUniverse's subreddit to just have a general discussion on where we stand in terms of the best episodes of the show and maybe some season comparisons we'll be getting into as well. A little explanation to have some context to all this. I'm a moderator of the community on Reddit that is gathered together to be fans of StevenUniverse together. So over there, I organized an episode tournament as a bit of a contest to keep our minds occupied during the hiatus. The tournament was a single elimination style tournament. For those who follow sports, think the NCAA basketball tournament, March Madness, if you will. The episodes were seeded by airing order, so basically each matchup was basically consecutive episodes that aired next to each other. You can take a look at that bracket at challenge.com/SUPostWanted, all together. There will be a link on overlyanimated.com if that's any easier for you to follow along. But after a month of voting matchups, we finally ended up with the winner, which was Mr. Greg, which was the Season 3 episode, recently nominated for an Emmy. It lost out to Adventure Time, but that was StevenUniverse's representative. And Mr. Greg beat out Jailbreak, who is the representative for Seasons 1 and 2. And Mr. Greg beat Jailbreak 54% to 46%. And over in third place in the consolation matchup, we had Ocean Gem just barely beating out Mindful Education 51% to 49%. So those were the top 4 episodes we ended up with. Mr. Greg, then Jailbreak, then Ocean Gem, then Mindful Education. And so I guess we'll begin right there at the top. What are your opinions on just the general consensus being that Mr. Greg is the best episode of StevenUniverse? We'll go to you, Dylan, first.
Well, look, Mr. Greg's a great episode of StevenUniverse. It's excellent. I loved it when it aired. It's truly great TV. But I think the notion of it being the best StevenUniverse episode is pretty absurd. And I'm shocked, I guess, that so many people agree with this. I mean, I wasn't that surprised that it won. I know it's a beloved episode by the fandom. It's really appealing. It's all songs. It's. I think one thing, and we'll get into this more, that this tournament proves is that at least the voting body for this for the R StevenUniverse subreddit very much favored emotionally charged episodes and song-filled episodes, which is kind of the show's MO. So I think that makes sense. But Mr. Greg isn't on my episode rankings. Mr. Greg would not even be a top 25 episode of StevenUniverse, probably not even a top 30, 35. It's in that, it's in that 35 to 50 range. But I remember during the Summer of Steven last year when I ranked all the Summer of Steven episodes, and this wasn't in my top 5 Summer of Steven episodes, and that was just a 20 episode event or something. So I love Mr. Greg. It's great. It's not a good winner choice here, though.
Okay, well, early with the hot takes. I
don't think that's that hot of a take, but I guess evidence says otherwise.
To go as far as to say Mr. Greg is not even a top 25 episode, I think that's where it becomes a hot take. But
I guess so. It's look, it's close. There's like 130 episodes of the show, so
yeah. Well, John, give us your idea here. Like, is Mr. Greg worthy of being considered the best episode of StevenUniverse?
To quote our incumbent president, wrong.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I just really wanted to do that. I'm not as harsh as Dylan when it comes to Mr. Greg. I actually put it at number 4 for last summer's bomb. I would say actually it's a pretty strong contender for a top 10. But when you just think about, I was looking at the bracket, and I would not say Mr. Greg was the best episode. I just think there were so many other better ones. Jailbreak was way better. That's mine. That's my number one. And you also have all the other episodes too. I think like you could even put almost the whole Wanted event in the top column as well if you treat that as one episode. So I want to take anything away from Mr. Greg. The music was fantastic. The scenery was amazing. It's probably the best Pearl episode we have going, aside from Last One Out of Beach City. But as number one, I don't know. I feel like we need a recount.
Well, we already had a recount.
Yeah, we had one. We're not going to get too much into it. But let's just say Jailbreak won the first vote, but after
major hacks,
after revelation of hackers, the side flip to Mr. Greg. But just to put in my 2 cents as well, I think Mr. Greg is a really great episode, and I think while it's not in my personal top 10, I can see the argument for it. But like putting it as best episode. Like, I think John brings up something important here that we do consider like one of the best Pearl episodes, and I think that a lot of Mr. Greg's appeal is riding on that. The fact that it is a culmination of seasons of character work that we've done on Pearl, who is a favorite character among fans of the show. So I think that has a lot to do with it. But just like if you try to consider the episode in a vacuum, I think that's where, logically speaking, you can't quite put it at that level.
Yeah, and so let me defend the claim on this not being. By the way, I don't agree that it's the best Pearl episode or even close. I think that the 2 best Pearl episodes are Rose the Scabbard and Sworn to the Sword, which are 2 of the actual top 5 episodes of the show.
What about Last One Out of Beach City?
I'd rank Mr. Greg ahead of that, but that's another great episode. I don't think either of those are nearing the quality of Rose the Scabbard or Sworn to the Sword. I basically think those 2 episodes, Sworn to the Sword specifically, is just like a strictly better version of Mr. Greg. Like, it's not filled with songs, but it's got the exact same Pearl feelings in it. And it's like a much better episode. I mean, look, again, Mr. Greg's great, but to defend the claim, the one Pearl song is incredible. Obviously, it's a really high moment for it. But then the episode also has a few lows that it's like, what is even happening narratively right now? Some of the songs aren't wonderful. And it has a few other pretty good moments, like Steven singing at the end. But, ultimately, I think, for me at least, putting it in that Rose the Scabbard Sworn to the Sword tier is not right.
Well, I don't know. It's like Sworn to the Sword, great episode. Really, again, but that was just, I feel like that, I don't think you could compare Pearl's feelings and emotions over those 2 episodes. I felt like it was being approached from 2 different dimensions.
Yeah, definitely there.
Like Sworn to the Sword was more it was more her in the role of Rose's Pearl, like the subservient type. The idea is like she would always fight for Rose. She wanted Connie to fight for Steven the same way, basically trying to create a doppel Pearl, or whatever you want to call it, in that sense. Whereas Mr. Greg, it was definitely more of the emotional side of things. It was the one that, for me at least, forced me to drop all opposition I had to the Rose Pearl ship and say, okay, I give up. She clearly loved her in a romantic way. I felt like that was approaching her relationship with Rose from that angle, whereas Sworn to the Sword approached it from the sort of, I guess, the more homeworld conventional servant-master relationship type thing.
Yeah, it's a good point. Mr. Greg is when Pearl's feelings become super explicit. There's no taking that away. It's a big moment. It's a big gay representation moment in the show. It's that's why that song is so incredible.
It effectively made a canon, and rather just a very strong theory.
I mean, I disagree on the theory language. It's definitely like explicitly stated. I got that same impression in pretty clear terms from Rose the Scabbard and Sworn to the Sword. It's like different elements of it, and I agree it's not as explicit. That's one of the things about Mr. Greg. It's like it's kind of just retreading on territory. It's more explicit about the feelings, but it's also like the 5th or 6th episode getting into this type of thing with Pearl, and I thought it'd been done better before. But anyway, there's other things to discuss with this bracket.
Yeah, but also just going back into like how Mr. Greg got to this point, it'd be 2 episodes that to me I think have an argument for being better episodes overall. Like, for example, it'd be Bismuth 65% to 35%, and even earlier it hit the Diamond 83% to 17%. And though, like, for example, Hit the Diamond, like that's just a totally opposite type of episode that they're aiming for. Like, that's going for like not at all with emotion, just pure humor. And I think like in that sense, if you consider StevenUniverse a comedy, like Hit the Diamond would have to be considered like in your top 5 episodes, I think, of the entire show. So the fact that Mr. Greg was able to beat that episode so handily, like, that surprised me seeing that happen.
Yeah, I want to talk about those two. I want to talk about those two matchups specifically. You go ahead, John, first.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, I think it kind of makes, again, it's really tough, though, because, again, as Alex, as you pointed out, it's, if you consider Steven Universe a comedy, Hit the Diamond was pretty funny. At the same time, it's just my memory of Hit the Diamond was that it started off as as the kind of episode that was, was presented to be this big, massive battle, and then it wound up just being baseball. It's like, if you want, it kind of was, it was very sort of meta. They kind of played with how it was so unexpected. I didn't mind it at all. It was good, but if it's going up against Mr. Greg, which is an iconic episode, it's not going to be a fair fight.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that's what most people agreed on. I mean, it was 83-17. And for the record, I voted in every single round of this. So my opinion is factored into the results already. But I think for me, Hit the Diamond's an even more iconic episode of the show. Like, I guess like it's Mr. Greg's more flashy. And if you're approaching Hit the Diamond from a plot expectation standpoint, obviously in the kind of the current context of Steven Universe not really advancing the plot, then it's a little bit of a letdown. I don't have a problem with Mr. Greg beating Hit the Diamond. I personally think Hit the Diamond is a better episode. I would put Hit the Diamond in my top 25, probably top 20. I think it's incredible. It was my number one. That was before Summer of Steven, but it would have ranked very highly. And I went back on my Summer of Steven rankings. I had Mr. Greg number 6, so it's not. I said not a top 5, so that's not barely. But I don't agree with that result. I think Hit the Diamond's incredibly funny, incredibly emotionally poignant. It's just really incredible. It's a really incredible episode. Mr. Greg beating Bismuth is my worst result of the tournament. That's like my least favorite matchup. There's another one that Alex will mention later that's also really bad, but this is just really wrong. Here's my overarching context for everything I'm saying episode quality wise with Steven Universe. Here are my top 5 episodes of Steven Universe. And this is supposedly from an objective sense. Like, I'm actually trying to be factor out, like, there's certain episodes I have like an irrational love for. This is like what I think is genuinely objectively critical quality wise, the 5 best episodes of Steven Universe. Number 1 is Rose's Scabbard. I think that's kind of always been the best episode of the show ever since it aired. Kind of the debate's always been between that and Jailbreak, and they're both incredible. Rose's Scabbard just achieves an emotional resonance that the show frequently gets close to, but has not hit that high for me since. Number 2 is Bismuth. So that's why I think this is such an absurd result, Mr. Greg beating Bismuth. This is the one I think people would most disagree with of my top 5. People are pretty extreme opinions on Bismuth, but yes, the ending is rushed and morally questionable. I think it's an amoral episode, though. I don't think it's trying to take a stance. I don't think you can just say Steven's perspective is like what the show is advocating. And I just think that episode has such incredible characterization with every single character in our cast in such a way that has not been done with any other episode of Steven Universe. It's just incredibly emotionally resonant, such a great one character introduction. Bismuth is like a clear number 2 for me. Number 3 is Sworn to the Sword. As I mentioned, incredible Pearl episode. Love the song and everything else in the episode. It's just really emotionally resonant. Number 4 is Jailbreak. So I wouldn't have had a problem if Jailbreak won this. I think it's a top 5 episode of the show. It's always been incredible, really high points with Stronger Than You, and the rest of the episode's also great. And then number 5 is Earthlings, which was absurdly ejected from this tournament. But I don't get why more people don't like Earthlings. Like, it's everyone likes it, but I don't get why more people don't love it. It's the best plot episode of Steven Universe other than Jailbreak ever. Like, there's so
Earthlings
much.
Was bounced in the second round. That was. But you know, it is also. I think I'm going to blame the bracket on that one. No offense, Alex, but it's like
Taken.
If we were to make a comparison, it's sort of like, and this is going to get really nerdy. This is going to get very nerdy for the 2 fans that will get this. It's like when the English make the drawing for the FA Cup. I'm talking soccer here. You're going to get Chelsea against Man United in one group in the first round, and then the next round is going to be like Aldershot Town versus Scunthorpe. And that's sort of like what you had here. You had there were a couple matches where it was like 2 Titans going at it, and then 2 like vastly inferior episodes going at it, and you knew like that was not going to be fair on the Titans, that they had the misfortune of being part of a very strong block.
I didn't understand any of your reference, but I get the general gist. Yeah, but yeah, Earthlings.
Okay, well, NCAA tournament reference. It's like if the first round is Duke against North Carolina.
Okay, that one I got. Yeah,
and another match is UNC Wilmington against Alabama A&M.
Yeah, more on the bracket seating in a second. That's a separate discussion. But yeah, Earthlings is just so many great plot revelations. It's just so incredibly paced and wonderful. Just really love that episode. Alex, what do you think of my top 5 there?
I think it's a solid top 5, and I think the issue here is that when we were doing the voting, I was very vague just to let people vote how they wanted. I was like, which one do you enjoy the most, or which one do you like the most? So that's kind of an issue right here, because for example, let's say Bismuth, right? Are you going to have more emotional attachment to a character that appeared in one episode, or a character that you've seen since the first episode of the show? And so that while Bismuth could be a better episode, objectively speaking, but Mr. Greg, because it felt like there had been so much build up, and it was a character that many of us emotionally resonate with, we end up siding with the maybe objectively inferior episode, but because it had a bigger emotional impact. And maybe that's what we're looking for from the show, rather than just narrative excellence.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's hard to fault people for voting for their favorites. I can't say, oh, you're wrong, that Mr. Greg's your favorite. I mean, I can try to say you're wrong, that it's objectively a better episode, but
and I literally did.
Yeah. So I did sometimes vote favorites as well. Like the one episode I love way more than anyone else on the planet is the new Lars from the Summer of Steven last year. Well known that I love that on this podcast. That lost in the first round. There's Too Short to Ride. Too Short to Ride, an incredible episode, but that was the worst result I think of the tournament. Actually, was the new Lars, which by the way, better episode than Mr. Greg. There you go.
Right.
I mean, Too Short to Ride benefits from great use of Peridot.
Yeah.
And let's face it, Peridot might be the most beloved character in the show right now.
Oh, 100% Peridot's the most beloved character. I'm surprised the Peridot episodes didn't even perform better in this tournament, honestly.
Yeah, and we'll get to matchups that were a bit earlier in the tournament, but before we move on, I do want to just do a quick highlight to who was second place, which was Jailbreak. I found it interesting that after all this time, it's still considered a very highly regarded episode, to the point where it makes it all the way to the end. It ended up being the representative for seasons 1 and 2, which were, for the most part, represented that half of the bracket, beating out episodes like Ocean Gem, like Sworn to the Sword, like Full Disclosure. So how do you feel about Jailbreak? This far, now that we have all this hindsight, is it still worthy of being considered the best episode of that the first half of the show?
For me, yes, I would have been satisfied with Jailbreak as a winner. As someone whose podcast done Steven Universe for a long time now, Jailbreak's always been the best episode of the show for the general fandom consensus, I think. So I expected it to win this bracket. I generally think this is what people say is the best episode of the show. For me, it's number 4. But I don't have a problem with it winning. The top 5's all pretty close together. The question's always been Rosa Scabbard versus Jailbreak. I've always said Rosa Scabbard versus better. Jailbreak won in this bracket, whatever, that's fine. It beats Sworn to the Sword, whatever. But yeah, Jailbreak is still one of the best episodes of the show. And I think once we get further away from Mr. Greg, we'll go back to thinking of Jailbreak as the best episode.
That's definitely a possibility we have to consider with recency bias. Also, this tournament was done right around the time that the Emmy nomination happened, so we kind of just had a general groundswell of support for Mr. Greg. So it might have influenced, and you're right, maybe in the end, once the entire show is over, we'll still go back to Jailbreak. Who knows? But John, how do you feel about Jailbreak being the representative episode for the first 2 seasons of the show?
I mean, you won't hear any argument from me. I'm looking at the bracket, and that first round, that's definitely a Duke Michigan case, because the return was almost as good as Jailbreak, and really almost good as anything else in the show. But yeah, Jailbreak is still memorable for a lot of reasons. It was, it followed up the return, which had that shock ending. We learned that we had that big grand reveal that Garnet was a fusion, which still struck a chord with a lot of people. Not only that, but also the fact it was a clear representation of a lesbian romantic relationship, which obviously is going to stick with a very strong subsect of the Steven Universe fan base. And also another great musical number, Stronger Than You is still one of the best songs in the show. So it's definitely no surprise. It was such a great season finale. It carried through to the season 2. It it tied up a lot of what happened in the previous episodes. It was just a really solid 15 minutes of TV. It was a great show. Is it the best episode? I don't know, but certainly for the first 1 or 2 seasons, it's hard to argue against it.
Yeah, so Jailbreak versus Mr. Greg, they both have a really incredible high point with their best songs of the episode. They're 2 of the best scenes of the show. I think the difference is the rest of Jailbreak is also incredible, and then the rest of Mr. Greg is just like an average episode of Steven Universe, I would say.
I would agree there, and in the final, I also voted for Jailbreak. Personally, actually, I prefer It's Over, Isn't It, 2 Stronger Than You, but I think Jailbreak as a whole is a more consistent episode. Like from the very beginning, when we have Steven finding himself in the cells with Ruby and them like searching around the ship and all, like that's interesting from the very beginning. Whereas Mr. Greg, you start off with the whole Empire City rock song thing where it kind of takes a bit for you to get invested. So I think if you consider the 2 episodes like on their wholes, Jailbreak is better, although I think Mr. Greg has the higher peak, so to speak.
I still think Stronger Than You is going to be considered by many to be the best scene of the show.
Well, I think, and I think as a song as well, you have to think about it. It's been it's been made into an Undertale parody, which I actually found telling my Alexa to play Stronger Than You, and there is an Undertale parody of it, which is hilarious. Estelle at this year's San Diego Comic-Con actually did an outdoor concert where she sang it with everybody, with like about 500 people in the background who signed up to do it. And it still has a huge resonance with a lot of people, but then you have It's Over, and then you have It's Over, Isn't It, which hasn't been parodied, but frankly, at least for me, it's probably Dee Dee Magno-Hall's best vocal work to date. So it's two different things. It sings about 2 different things, and you can easily enjoy both. But I think Stronger Than You definitely has the more longest lasting impact with fans.
Okay, interesting. I'm not sure if the consensus is one way or the other here, but yeah, like for sure that Jailbreak I think has a lot more going for it than Mr. Greg if we consider it as a whole. But now that
it also has the bias of being integral to the plot rather than being a one-off.
Yeah,
that's also true. Yeah, it has more. We have Malachite at the end. We seem to always forget about Malachite when we talk about Jailbreak, but that was also
that's my number 2 part of that episode is the emotional tension with Malachite at the end of that episode. I don't think like the show's hit that type of emotion since then to that extreme. Like that scene is so incredible.
Yeah,
it kind of. Malachite ticks me off because I feel like that's the worst aspect of Steven Universe so far. I feel like Malachite was so
hot take.
I would say Malachite was just so mishandled by the show's writers. You had this big huge monster appears at the end of Jailbreak, gets dragged into the ocean, and then you don't see her for a whole season. I'm like, wait, that's it? It's like it kept going. You still there, then faded off. You had another plot arc come in with Peridot. I was just so annoyed because I thought that was going to be the big monster, but no, she shows up back for one scene, gets asked by Alexandrite, and then next we're dealing with Lapis and Jasper's combined problems. I was like, I didn't want that. I wanted Malachite to be the big bad at the end.
Unrelated to this bracket, I think a lot of what you're saying is right.
Yeah, and we can say that might have something to do with Super Watermelon Island being ousted a bit quicker than I expected here as well. Just the fact that is how Malachite ends. But no doubt the introduction of Malachite was awesome. But
I'm surprised I'm actually surprised Super Watermelon Island made it out of the first round. I thought Gem Drill was better.
Yeah, so
Gem Drill is a better episode.
So we can go now a bit like earlier in the matchups. Dylan, you already talked a little bit about the ones that bothered you the most, but we can go a little bit into it more. Earthlings lost to Back to the Moon in the second round. Is there any way to justify this from an objective standpoint?
It's a really stupid result. Back to the Moon's a good episode. Like we're talking top 75, maybe top 50. Like I really enjoy that episode, but I don't know where we're coming from there. What aspect is better?
Yeah, John, do you have any thoughts on this?
On Back to the Moon beating Earthlings?
Yeah.
Oh no, sorry. I just remember watching it. I mean, Back to the Moon definitely had that really sort of suspenseful ending, but Earthlings was like, for me, the last 5 minutes, Earthlings was like, holy crap! like it was just one successive shock and awe reaction after another. So for me, it should have, or that alone put Earthlings at the top for the summer, and it should have beaten Back to the Moon, which was, again, good. We learned more about Pink Diamond and all that junk, but it was like a sort of explanation episode.
Yeah, and I think the only way that like I can reasonably justify this is that Earthlings, the focus was on Jasper. She's pretty much disappeared from the show since then. Back to the Moon, we had the revelation of Pink Diamond, who has all of a sudden become an important figure in the plot line based on the last couple of episodes of the trial and all. So that would be the only way I could see it, that somehow like in the end you feel that Back to the Moon is more important of an episode than Earthlings, all things considered. But even then, I'm not sure if that's true, because we don't actually know what's going to happen to Jasper in the future, if she's going to make a reappearance.
Which she will. But yeah, you're right. It's more relevant to current events.
I put Jasper in my number 5 animated villain of all time. I would love to have her back.
Yeah, but like I guess just because she's kind of out of our consciousness for the time being, so I guess Earthlings loses that impact, or at least the same impact it had when it first aired and we saw all the entire corruption. But it's definitely a better episode overall than Back to the Moon, I think. But that would be the only way to justify that. Another big thing that came out of this around like upsets here, we had a log date 15-2, which is in my top 10 for sure, losing to Message Received in the first round. So Peridot standalone versus introduction of Yellow Diamond. How do we feel about that matchup?
That one's really bad too. Message Received it's very exciting when Yellow Diamond's there, but that's kind of a pretty flawed episode. It's kind of rare that an episode of Steven Universe is like, oh, that wasn't that great. And the first episode, not like the whole episode, but like there's a part of it when you're watching, and like the first half of Message Received is kind of that. Whereas Log Date is one of the best of that type of episodes the show's done. I think it's probably not top 10 for me, but it is definitely top 25. It's so funny and such great characterization. Yeah, I heavily disagree with that one too.
I'll allow it, because did I like Log Date a little bit more? I did, but I can understand why Message Received won that battle, because again, Message Received is one of those episodes where there was a big event that changed the plot of the show. It changed the trajectory. You had Peridot, who by this point still wasn't quite an ally of the team yet. She was still very much self-interested in just getting off the planet before the cluster erupted. She was more in it for herself. And then for her to, first off, we see Yellow Diamond for the first time, and the spectacle and awe of her was well done. And then you had Peridot call her a clod. It was just and then basically just burning the bridge behind her, and effectively had no choice but to stay on Earth and become a crystal gem. It's one of the most important events in the show, and also done one of the funniest. So I think that's why that Message Received went as far as it did, and I can't blame anyone for that, because again, it had more of an impact going forward than Log Date did.
Yeah,
which is really interesting, because I think that episode's the only example of this bracket being biased in favor of plot relevant episodes. Like I said earlier, I think that people voted much more based off of the emotions displayed in the episode and kind of songs. Mindful Education is the embodiment of those two things, and it went into the top 4, despite the fact that I wouldn't even put that episode in my top 50. So that's a hot take there. But yeah, I think other than Message Received, you won't really find examples of this on the bracket of plot episodes going further than they should have. So I was surprised that episode did.
Well, I actually have to agree with you on that one, Dylan. I remember listening to other Steven Universe podcasts, reading reviews of it, and everyone was talking about how they were bawling their eyes out watching
Mr. Greg, Mindful Education.
No, Mindful Education. There we go. They were bawling their eyes out. I'm like, wait, I don't get it. What are we supposed to be emotional about in this episode? I'm not sure. It's a beautiful episode, but I'm not sure where everyone's like saying I had to like get a box of tissues for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very personal episode. Even though I think it's a worse episode than Mr. Greg to a pretty significant degree, there's just no narrative in there. I'm very high on narrative, and that informs a lot of my objective, like, like what I'm trying to say here, what's better. So, an episode with like zero narrative and it's going to have a harder time, in my whatever rankings in my head.
And while we're on the topic of mindful education, I do want to point out it beat out here Last One Out of Beach City and That Will Be All, 2 episodes that I think are better overall than mindful education.
I'll put That Will Be All behind mindful education, but Last One Out of Beach City was amazing.
I don't have huge preferences for any of those episodes mentioned. I think That Will Be All is the best of them, but I don't think it's like a top 25 episode of the show, which I know Alex disagrees on. I also don't think like Last One Out of Beach City. I don't know. It's a really great episode for what it is. I think that comparing it to some of these other Titans that I'm talking about is going too far. But even though I think both of those are better than mindful education, I don't know, similar tier. But yeah, mindful education is it's on a different plane of any other episode of StevenUniverse. It's just so emotion based, and John, you didn't have an emotional reaction to it as much as other people did. I didn't really either, but it's going to be such a personal viewing experience for people. So I think like I'm not going to have as many complaints about that making the top 4, even though I very much disagree, just because it's going to vary so much person to person. Whereas I think Mr. Greg's more similar to other episodes of the show we've seen. I think it's pretty comparable to Rose. I mean, it's very different, but it's comparable in some of the emotions explored to Rose's Scabbard or Sworn to the Sword, as I mentioned, or any other Pearl episode. And, the songs are similar to other songs in the show. So, like, I feel like it's easier for me to say these other episodes are strictly better than Mr. Greg, whereas there's really no comparable for mindful education.
Yeah. So we have that theme going on in this tournament. I think the last big one that stood out to me was Rose's Scabbard losing to Jailbreak in the 3rd round. Rose's Scabbard, I think, is also very worthy of a top 10 episode status, and I figured that it would have gotten past Jailbreak. I feel like it's still more beloved, but at least in this tournament it wasn't. Where do we stand on Rose's Scabbard today in terms of ranking, Dylan?
Yeah, so I mentioned this. It's up to you talk to on which episode you'll find people like better. I think in the plane of existence that Overly Animated operates on, Rose's Scabbard is more beloved. But I think I'm not surprised Reddit voted Jailbreak more. But don't ask. We don't need to get into details on that. But yeah, I think I don't have like a giant problem with Jailbreak beating Rose's Scabbard. This is the eternal StevenUniverse episode ranking questions. It's existed for several years, which is better. They aired in the same week. So this has been an ongoing debate for many years. And not that many years, but quite a few years. Rose's Scabbard is the best episode of the show. I've said that for a long time. It's achieves an emotional resonance that no other episode has. It's better than Jailbreak. It should have won, but I'm not up in arms about this. Jailbreak's also great.
John, thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Rose's Scabbard is definitely in my top tier. Again, sticking with the basketball thing, this is the Duke Kentucky matchup in the Sweet 16. So we shouldn't disparage Rose's Scabbard for losing early too much. Just Jailbreak's going to always be in the top list. I feel like when the show finally runs its course, Jailbreak's going to still be in the top 5 for a lot of people. Rose's Scabbard's going to be in the top 10 very easily. I don't think of it as high as Dylan does. I definitely think there are a lot more better episodes than Rose's Scabbard, but just in terms of in the context of Pearl's character, it definitely made her that was the episode that made her a lot more complex, where you knew there was something more to it than just her being the stand-in mom. So for a lot of reasons, Rose's Scabbard was a great episode, and you see her start to work through it. So again, it's sad that it lost. I feel like if you did another bracket, it would go a lot farther, but I can't fault it too badly for losing to a pretty great episode.
And is it?
Yeah, I have much more of a problem with Back to the Moon beating Earthlings by like to a 5th degree than I do this result. This result's like understandable.
It's interesting to me that we've been talking about the theme of like emotional beating out plot, but I feel like in this case, like Rose's Scabbard is by far the more emotional of the 2 episodes, especially that ending. Whereas Jailbreak has more plot relevance, and it seems Jailbreak won out here. So at least here it seems like against the trend that we were seeing.
The thing with Jailbreak is it's both. Like that's why it's so resonant for so many people. It's one of the emotional highs of the entire show, with the scene that's so resonant for so many people. But it's also a plot advancement episode. Like it's so special in looking back on all of the show's episodes, and there's not really anything comparable to it.
I suppose the combination
it hit both notes right on.
Yeah, the combination probably pushes it over the top there. And finally, we haven't really talked much about the more recent episodes of the show, but I found it very interesting that of the last two bombs that we've had, Off Colors was the one to come out of it. So not I Am My Mom, not The Trial, not The Good Lars, Off Colors, their introduction. How do like, at least to me that was very confusing because it's not an episode that stands out. Like maybe it's impressive in its humor, right? Maybe, but uh, I can't really make sense of it. Can you guys?
Ooh. Yeah, I don't know. It's because I think because Off Colors for me was the weakest of the four. My only guess is that a lot of people really liked the Off Colors. I feel like this is sort of built in as the community saying that they want more Off Colors. They want this to be a better episode so that we can get them again in the future, even though we know that we will. It was definitely, I think you'll just like seeing new characters, maybe. I was shocked. I'm not surprised it beat Lars's head, really. That's a take or leave it. Losing to The Trial, I thought, was really surprising because I thought The Trial was the best of the four. I was hoping The Trial would actually go a lot farther because it was a big sort of flip the table over episode where everything we knew is a lie, and it basically makes season 5 this trying to figure out how deep of a lie that was. So I was surprised The Trial lost out because of that.
So I think the off colors, the off color gems are a factor, but I think the biggest reason that off colors would differentiate between the rest of these is the hashtag Lars Redemption, the big Lars moment here. This is the, I believe it happens this episode. Like they're kind of together in my head, but yeah, that's like a huge moment for a lot of people. Lars has a lot of fans. That moment's so resonant. I don't think there's a big difference between Off Colors and Lars's Head. I think they're similar quality. I agree with John. I think The Trial is the standout episode of this group, but I don't think it's by a lot. So I don't really have a huge issue with Off Colors representing the most recent episodes. I think they're all good. I think they're all like pretty equally good in my head, but we're not far enough away. I think as we get further away, I think The Trial might come further apart as the best episode of them. But right now in my head, they're all in a similar tier.
Okay.
I have this might be a little off topic, but I feel but quick answer. Who would you rather stand trial in front of? Yellow and Blue Diamond or the Council of Ricks?
Completely unrelated to this. Council of Ricks.
Well, neither was fair. He had no rights, and he didn't really have a lawyer.
But neither side has very competent lawyers, so
No, actually, we shouldn't say that. Blue Zircon was a pretty good lawyer.
I'd rather have Zircon than a Morbius.
Well, the competence didn't matter if the judges have already decided. But yes, beside the point. At least for me, like Stuck Together, I still ride for that episode as the best. But I know I'm in the minority in that sense, though. But it beating The Trial was particularly surprising to me. But I guess your reasonings make sense that it's like a combination of just the happiness over Lars finally getting character development, plus the Off Colors being interesting enough characters. So yeah, at least to me, those are the main matchups that stood out to me. Are there any matchups that you guys want to point out before we move on here?
I mean, we could go through the whole bracket. Here's one that me and Alex are on opposite sides of: When It Rains versus Back to the Barn.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, Back to the Barn, actually, I've said my top 5. I think Back to the Barn might be number 6. Like there's a drop off and there's like a 6 to 10 are all kind of the same. But I love that episode. Back to the Barn lost to When It Rains in the first round. Also, Too Far is in my top 10. This was during like the high point of the show for me, this barn arc. And The Answer beat Too Far. Very heavily disagree with both of those results.
Yeah, that one was that's a weird. I'm looking at that section of the bracket. It's definitely a weird section. All things considered, When It Rains goes farther than The Answer, which I thought was a better episode. It goes farther than Too Far, which I thought was a better episode, and it beat Back to the Barn, which I thought was a better episode. Back to the Barn was, I mean, who doesn't love robot fights?
Yeah.
Come on, people. Although When It Rains was definitely one of those adorable. It was one of those how cute episodes.
Yeah, by the way, The Answer it's great. I think that one could have gone further too. Whatever of Too Far in The Answer won, I think should have went like Elite Eight or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that like this was I think the only part where I voted emotionally rather than objectively, because I can agree that at least the answer is a better episode overall than When It Rains. But at least just to me, I have a special spot for When It Rains just because I pinpoint that as like the true beginning of Parademption. Just the first scene where you see Peridot like warming up to Steven, like the explanation of Rain, and then her stepping out for the first time, like growing that trust in Steven. And even the parts where they get taken into the kindergarten and you have the humor sprinkled in. You also have some form of tension, especially like that ending where they're in the bubble and Steven has to convince Peridot to tell the gems, and Peridot slowly comes to realization. So just all that together, like it feels to me the perfect balance of humor, emotion, and character that the show has done in a long time. So just for me, that's why I hold When It Rains in high regard, especially compared to other people. But in any case, I was very surprised that other people were with me to the point of getting it past episodes like The Answer and Catch and Release. But just from it.
You're an influential Reddit SU mod. Like your opinion is maybe even more influential than mine now, Alex. This is the new norm.
Yeah. I don't want that power.
I mean, When It Rains is When It Rains is a lovely episode. Don't get me wrong. It's just, in that brick, you had a lot of just really strong episodes, and it's maybe it's just because I prefer seeing Peridot and Pearl fighting with robots over Peridot learning with Rain. But I mean, that was just I think that whole block of episodes, that was like the fall of 2015. That was just a really solid run for the show, like straight week in,
really
week out.
Yeah.
And I think here we can just make a little mention of the seeding here, because I think this area of the bracket was the biggest, the most hurt by this whole idea of doing it by airing order. So, but like when you're trying to figure out how to rank episodes, is there a let's say, not a correct way to do it, but like what would be the most efficient way of like eliminating episodes when you're doing rankings, or at least in your personal sense? Let's go to
for seeding the tournament, or
I guess just in general, like how do you go about when you just are presented with a block of episodes? What do you do to put one ahead of the other?
Oh, so I'm the expert on ranking episodes. I rank every episode for every show ever. Here's the correct way to do it. Is I'm being tongue in cheek here. Is you rewatch the whole show. You have tiers. You have top tier. You have like excellent, incredible, like very good, mediocre. And as you watch, put an episode into the tiers, and then keep watching, and then keep putting them into your rankings and develop it as you go. Like I don't trust my rankings in a true sense unless I've just rewatched the whole show, basically, for whatever show.
Okay. And John, since you've been providing more of the sports metaphors, I'll go to you on this. Like in terms of actual seeding of the tournament, what would be your recommended way of doing this next time around?
I'm going to say you don't seed them at all, and I'm going to go to chess for my reference here. In chess, when they rank the best players in the world using the ELO system. And I was thinking, because I remembered what this in The Social Network, where Mark Zuckerberg and Eduardo Saverin, they do a ranking of who the hottest girls are in Harvard. They use something called the ELO system, where it's a 1-versus-1 matchup, and whichever one wins gets points. And if you beat a lower tier episode, you get less points. If a lower tier beats a higher tier, it gets more points. And that's how they do it in chess, where you have two people constantly playing each other, and certain wins count for more. Over the long run, and over like crowdsourcing it, if you have just a bunch of people just doing matchups by matchup by matchup, eventually you'll actually have a ranking system that puts all the top episodes will have the higher scores, and the worst episodes will have a lower score because they'll keep losing matchups or they'll keep winning matchups. That would be probably the fairest way of dealing with something with as big a sample size as this.
Yeah, a lot of websites do this. They have a pool of things. They display 2 of them. They have people click on which one they like more, and they have them just keep popping up stuff. And then eventually it'll show the global standings for based on 1-versus-1 matchups.
That's ELO. That's the ELO system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean ELO you need you need people actually playing each other, right? So if you're just seeding it with it before people have played each other, this isn't super relevant.
No. You don't need people playing with each other. You just need to show the matchups, and as it's crowdsourced, the matchup, the different episodes will have corresponding scores. So, and then
if you want to do it a single elimination bracket, though, you can't keep displaying them.
Admittedly,
it wouldn't be single elimination. It wouldn't be single elimination.
Right. We're talking. So the question would be, if we're doing single elimination, what's the best way to see them? My answer would be there is no best way. Like this is an unsolvable problem. I think the biggest consequence for me of doing it by airing order was not even these high quality groups, which are true. I think it's the fact that all of the kind of mediocre season 1 episodes were right next to each other. I think that there's a huge drop off in quality of like the first half of season 1 and the rest of the show. So a lot of times in like every round, I'd be voting on 2 season 1 episodes like that really just were no differentiating in my mind. They'd be in the bottom 30 episodes of the show, and those should be like the like 15, 16 seeds in the NCAA tournament.
Right, and I think just with reference to the ELO system, like there is a thing, right, between efficiency and aesthetically pleasing, right? Because you can't really like see the results as it's going until, well, I guess you can, but just like in terms of numbers, whereas like a single elimination tournament, you have the whole like actually getting to see like what road the matchups will take, whereas in ELO it's a bit more confusing to figure that out, at least without not having all the information in front of you, right? So. But like in terms of just having it as a tournament, there are definitely flaws in ways of doing this, and especially as I've seen it progress. But and also just with reference to the lower quality episodes, like to me that stood out in the final ones of season 4. We had stuff like Ronaldo versus Tiger Philanthropist and Ruby Line 4, like episodes.
And it's like Tiger Philanthropist and Ronaldo wouldn't be anywhere near the second round if we were doing like top versus bottom.
The fact that line 4 made it to the third round was like in a normal sense that shouldn't make any sense, but yeah.
Yeah, but if potentially the only other way to do this, like if we were running this again next year, is to like take either the IMDb rankings of the show, like people rated on a scale of 1 to 10. Those are really flawed, but or you just suck it up and take someone's personal rankings, and then you just base it off of that. Like if I do a rewatch and I do my personal rankings, like you can just do that for someone and you base the seating off of that. It would be potentially better than airing.
Right,
later.
and
you could. You can go really full NCAA and have like, the Garnet region, the Amethyst region, the Pearl region, and the Steven region, and
so
just have
you'd run into similar problems here with the Pearl episodes, yeah.
Well, it's like you could put every Pearl episode at the top, right, almost straight away.
And then all the towny episodes get lumped into the Garnet and Steven regions.
And then the Amethyst region, there was Onion Friend.
True.
I think in that scenario, finally, my champion, the new Lars, could shine and champion over the Townie episodes. But even then, I don't think people would vote for it.
Yeah, where did the new Lars end up? It lost.
It lost.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Which, to be fair, Too Short to Ride's great. But yeah.
I must admit, I did like the new Lars as well. It was. I know why people didn't like it. It's because Lars is not that likable of a character. Or at least he wasn't at that point. But I must admit, I liked the whole body swap thing. I liked how
best body swap episode ever.
I just love how it's just the total absurdity of it. It's like Steven's trying to make sure Lars isn't, tries to represent Lars the best way possible, and it's like he's representing Lars. He doesn't have far to go in order to. It's like if he acts too good, people are gonna realize it's not him, which I thought was kind of hilarious. And also, we now know what Lars does before he goes to bed at night, which is always fun to know.
Maybe now that we've redeemed Lars, we can people can love the Lars episodes more,
and we can forgive his taste in gentleman's literature.
Speaking of Lars, one thing I did want to point out, like I think as a result of the whole Lars redemption, Lars and the Cool Kids beat out Steven the Sword Fighter, which was really interesting to me because I feel like Steven the Sword Fighter for a long time was considered one of the best early episodes. So the fact that Lars and the Cool Kids jumped out in front of it, like that stood out to me.
What was Steven the Sword Fighter again?
I don't even remember these
for the first time. We have Hollow Pearl.
Yeah, that was a big one. Yeah,
like that was the first like big thing of the show.
Oh yeah, that was when we first introduced the concept of regeneration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that getting beaten by Lars and the Cool Kids, which was kind of also the introduction of the cool kids with Buck and sour cream and all. Like it's a fine episode, but I guess I figured that the consensus would be much stronger for Stephen Pearl.
Yeah, that's a fair
Yeah.
point.
But all in all, we had some very interesting matchups here and interesting discussions on both the Reddit and on this podcast as to what episodes came on top. But for the meantime, Mr. Greg will be the winner for this year until I get the energy to organize this again at some point next year. Over under and how many extra episodes I will have to add to this bracket.
5.
John, you?
What?
Dylan put the over/under at 5 on new episodes until next year.
In the next calendar year, yeah.
Oh God. I'm gonna say over but I don't think we're gonna get a new episode until well after Comic-Con in New York ends.
No, it's actually like 25. We can. I still think we're looking at a sizable chunk of episodes later this year.
Get
but
your
we'll
optimism out of here.
The last time we had an unbearably long hiatus, we got that Steven Nuke in the summer. Maybe this means we're going to get a Steven Nuke in the winter or early next year.
Yeah, and by the way, 25 would be low in a year up until this point, so I'm still being pessimistic. But yeah,
our patience will hopefully be rewarded.
Right, and yeah, we do have to have New York Comic-Con to look forward to, in case maybe new footage. Who knows? We also have a new song being promised on their official podcast, but other than that, we have very little content to go on for the rest of this hiatus.
They might reveal a trailer. They might play a new episode. They did that 2 years ago, actually. But yeah, I mean, we're definitely keep our ears open. We have to keep our ears open because I think they're gonna tell us something important. I have a funny feeling about that.
Yeah, we can dream. But yeah, in case they mention anything new, anything big, we'll probably discuss it on this podcast, and you can find out all the info on this podcast at overlyanimated.com. You can leave your comments on overlyanimated.com, or now you can join us on Discord if you want to chat with us about this particular podcast or any animation topic. You can join us at overlyanimated.com/Discord. We would also
come tell me why I'm wrong on Discord. Yeah, you can.
We're available there for arguments. You can also support us financially via Patreon. We would also appreciate that. You can do so at patreon.com/overlyanimated. We want to give thanks to all of our current patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, Hugh, aka Hugh Neutron. And we want to give thanks as always to our Patreon executive producers, John, Ryan, Steve, Andy, and yours truly. Besides StevenUniverse, we're also covering regularly right now BoJack Horseman. We're finishing up coverage on season 4 there. And we're also doing podcasts on Rick and Morty, so you can also keep up with us if you're interested in that as well. So before we leave, any final thoughts on StevenUniverse in general?
In general?
On this tournament or in general?
And the hiatus.
Any hot takes you've been guarding up for the past 100 days?
Yeah, we've been in the dark now for 111 days, the longest in StevenUniverse history. So there you go.
You owe us, Cartoon Network.
There's extenuating circumstances. We'll maybe discuss that at a later point. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah. We'll talk StevenUniverse and other animated shows that are not leaving us in the dark in the future. But on that note, we'll leave you guys. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Adios.
Bye.
Take care.